Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining me this morning. This started with a conversation over the summer with Judy Mahan. Many of you may know Judy, one of the co-executive directors here. And we were talking about business and life, and I was asking her some questions, getting some advice, and she understood a little bit about my background and asked if I would be willing to come in and share a little bit about my years of business experience working with fast-growing companies. And of course, I'm delighted to be here. I'm really excited about the work that's done here at the CIE and for small businesses. And if I can lend any and impart any advice that you can adopt as you grow your businesses, I'd be thrilled about that. So a little bit about my bio. I currently work for a company called Land Gorilla. We are a San Luis Obispo-based software company. We have employees here in the United States and elsewhere. And what we do is we provide construction lending software to financial institutions. And this allows them to make loans to homeowners that want to build a new home or renovate an existing home using loan funds. I've been here for 4 years. I'm the director of operations, and so my responsibilities include supporting a team of client-facing folks who support our business customers and some other teams that run our operations and support some additional services. In terms of the themes of my background, I would say two things. One, I have worked for high-growth, technology-centered businesses. So past the stage of being startups, where you're still throwing things and seeing if it sticks on the wall, but you have enough sort of operational foundation to continue to build and scale your business. That's a sweet spot for me, and I've been really fortunate to get to work in a number of companies in that stage of growth. The second thing I'd say is the work that I focused on, my area of expertise, aligns very nicely with my passions as well, and that's really twofold. One has been around building strong relationships with customers, right? Customers love your products and services, but if you don't build trust, there's a good chance they go elsewhere over time. So building relationships with customers. And secondly, it's about helping teams succeed. And that's really aligned with scalability. All right. So what I'm going to be focusing on this morning is really centered around the future state. And the future state is when your business is so wildly successful that you can no longer take care of your customers individually or personally. Your small team has gotten, it's too small to handle the volume of business you have. And at some point, inevitably, you're going to grow your staff and you're going to need to hand over the care of your customers to a team of people that you haven't hired yet, that aren't part of your team. And why this is important is I've seen over time in working in high growth companies that everybody's running really hard and really fast, and laying some foundational elements in place will allow those future staff members to serve your customers the way you want them served and the way that you've served them up until that point. And so I'm going to just provide some recommendations, some small tips, and also some other things to consider that you can implement along the way, along your journey of building your business, that will lay a foundation for future team members to deliver a great customer experience. I'll also share just a few recommendations and things based on my experience and things I've learned the hard way, specifically, again, serving larger business customers that hopefully will lend some benefit to you. We'll also open up for Q&A, but feel free to, again, chat any questions or feel free to interrupt. I want this to be collaborative and hear what you have to say. So what this very, very simple graph is showing us is companies that are in growth mode. So a small business starts, and this is a picture of a small business that's successful, that's growing. And that's the blue line. The blue line is customer growth over time. It's moving in the right direction. It's moving in an upward direction. And that's where you want to be as a business, right? And during those early stages, you're focused on probably two primary things: developing and building out your product or your service, and acquiring customers, right? Product and service doesn't have a place unless you have customers. So in this early stage, you're spending a lot of your time and focus on getting customers, awareness about your products and services, bringing that customer in, getting them to use your product and service, and having conversations about how that product and service can better meet their needs. So that's a lot of your focus. And this is probably being handled by you. Maybe you have some co-founders, maybe you have a very small team, and you're designing your product, you're delivering your service, you're establishing all the processes and elements that go into operating your business. What the orange line represents is what I call operational readiness. And so those are the kind of things that you have to have in place to run a business. So that may be things like a product to offer, a way to communicate that offer, a price for your product or your service, a way for them to acquire that product or service, and then to service that customer over time. And what I've seen is what can happen is the focus is so much on running hard and fast to build your business that there isn't as much time or focus on making sure you're scaling your business at the same time. And specifically, what I think about is how at the time when you will be needing to add staff, can you prepare that future staff to do a great job servicing your customer? So there can be a gap there, and that can be a problem that you may not see right now, and you don't want to see it at the point when you've got so many customers, and then you realize, ooh, I'm not in a position to deliver great service to those customers. And why does this matter? Well, it matters because it costs, and you probably have seen this data along the way, it costs from 5 to 7 times more to acquire a new customer than to retain an existing customer, right? And when you do a great job of meeting customer expectations and delighting customers, they become loyal. And when these customers are loyal, they refer others to your company. And that's a great situation to be in. They're helping you increase your revenue. So delivering great customer service matters. Now, as a small business, you may be, or your small team of employees may be handling customer service today. And when we think about customer service, what most of us are very familiar with would be what I'm calling here a support team. Let's call it a customer service team or a help desk. And this type of role typically is related to fielding questions from customers, addressing issues with customers, right? It's typically going to be a team that's manning, let's say, different channels, chat or voice, maybe social, phone calls, and they are helping your customers use products and services and resolve any questions or needs that they have. And their business goal is to provide a delightful experience in that interaction. It's a little more transactional typically. And really what the customers care about is, quick responses, accurate answers, those types of things. And as companies grow and you start to have a lot of business customers in the SaaS space or technology space, we start to look at building out a team that is called customer success. And again, that phrase customer success is, you'll typically hear that around SaaS companies if you're a technology company. In other organizations, maybe it would be called an account manager or a relationship manager. And this particular role as companies grow is to be servicing your business customers. And by that, I mean helping to listen to their needs and make sure they are growing and potentially introducing them to more of your products and services, getting them to adopt more of your feature set, for example. So it's things like cross-sell and upsell. You may have heard those terms. And so this team is really focused on helping customers grow and also retaining the customer. Very, very important as you scale your business. So their goals is to make sure the client overall and over time is satisfied and increasingly using your products and services. So that's what success looks like. So customer success, again, is a piece of customer service. And down the road, as you get wildly successful, those are the kinds of positions that you will look to be considering to expand your team. Now, what these teams need, a couple basic things, as you build out a role for a customer service position, they need to understand what's the expectation of the role. And probably the two, real important things are they understand your products and services and they understand your clients. And this is the piece where when you're building your business, you are intimately familiar with your products and services because you are designing them and you are, likely interacting with your customers to get feedback on how to improve and how to meet their needs. And likewise, you understand your customer, your client. You've been interacting with them personally. You've been, probably sending them lots of emails, lots of phone calls, and you know what these customers are. You know the problems that they have, and or certainly are learning early on what those are, and you're looking to address those needs and problems. But as you expand your teams over time, the new team members that you may bring in don't have that deep knowledge of your product and your service, and they don't have that deep knowledge of your client. The other piece that they would need to understand is, what are the goals and measurements? What does it look like to be successful if I'm in a position to service a customer? What does that look like? How do we know if we're winning? How do we know if I'm doing a good job in this role? And the other piece I would say is understanding your company's mission, vision, and values. So at my company, for example, one of our values is empathy. And so for the client-facing team members, as we interact with customers, we're coming from a place of empathy as we listen to their needs and as we solve their problems. So what your values are, what your mission are, what your goals are, can very much tie in with how your employees, future employees, and your staff interact with your customers. And so one of the foundational elements I'll speak to is steps you can take to make sure that you have information about your customer, so that as you, again, expand over time, you can do that knowledge transfer, and as additional individuals in your company work with your customer, they have information they need to do a great job at delivering the service that you want. So today, you may be in a situation where you are, again, looking to acquire new customers. You may have some type of spreadsheet, some type of document you're using to track contacts and track prospects and potentially track customers that you have acquired, right? So who have I called? Where are they in the sales cycle? What's the next step on closing this particular deal or getting this customer to buy our product and service? That may be done in a spreadsheet today. What I would say, though, that can get missed or can be important to start to track is information about the history with that client. So one example would be, have you made any exceptions in the things that you're offering to your customers? So let's say you have a retail price of X or Y, and for this important customer of yours, you've made a special arrangement, a special deal, or you're delivering a custom type report. You're doing something maybe out of the ordinary. Starting to capture that information, again, as you do a handoff to other team members to service your customer. And that could also be, by the way, a case where you may be taking a vacation or you're not in the office and someone else needs to serve your customer, right? You want to have them have that kind of information at their fingertips, so that when that customer calls and says, hey, where's that report I normally get on Thursday? There's some information to help them be aware that that's the expectation and requirement. So the piece I would ask you to consider today is, what would you want a future customer service team member to know about your client? And capture that information now. The other thing that you may have in place, or I would encourage you to consider, is investing in a CRM, a customer relationship management tool. This is a piece of software, some of you may be using a CRM today, that basically captures and tracks the customer lifecycle. So this is used by multiple functional departments in a company. One would be your marketing team. So you're wanting to send out, let's say, email communications to customers, or you're tracking form fills from a website, understanding interest in a product or service of yours. So really actively used by marketing, as we go through that sales cycle from prospect to deal to having a customer. It's also very actively used by sales teams. And this is things like tracking your activities with prospects and tracking the stage of a deal, and documenting the contacts and their roles in the organization. So it's a very, very important part of a CRM. And then on the post-sale side, we're using a CRM to track our conversations with customers as we grow and help them build their business. And so what that looks like is conversations with customers, documenting key developments with customers. Maybe there's been a big organization change at a company. We want to make sure we have that noted. We want to make sure we understand what the customer is interested in, what their pain points are, what new features they would like to see. So that's all contained in the CRM. And what that allows is for other employees in your business or other stakeholders in your business to reference that information and use it to provide continuity for your customer. The other nice thing about this is it's a single ecosystem, right? So sometimes you may have a separate system for email marketing and a separate system to track your sales activity and maybe a separate system for a ticketing system. And that's okay, certainly, but to consider combining that into one system, there's a lot of power to it. And one of the main benefits is being able to get analytics and reporting. So you can understand, where did this customer start? Where are they today? What are the trends and which type of customers are using most of your products, for example? And where are we in a deal stage? And having all of that kind of reporting and analytics in one system is very, very beneficial to provide the transparency and most importantly, to help you as a business make smart business decisions. What I have on the bottom left is a review website. I don't know if you're not familiar, g2.com and capterra.com are two software review websites, and those are great places to go to get user feedback. So I'm a small business and I'm considering a CRM. These websites will help you hear what other small businesses have to say about these particular pieces of software, their strengths and weaknesses, so you can make a judgment call and a decision on one that might meet your needs. I've listed a couple here. HubSpot is one that my company uses. And so when I came into the company 4 years ago, we just adopted this new system. And one of the first things I did was I identified what are the attributes that we want to track about our customers. And it was super easy to go in and establish those attributes. So it might be things like which products and services is this customer using? Where are they headquartered? So if I have a East Coast-based customer, I know that I've got a team that can service that East Coast-based customer. It can be things like maybe what industry are they in? It can be things like their business size, their asset size, things like that. So you can identify attributes that you want to track, and then you can report on that, and you can see which customers and what profile of customers maybe are being the most successful, are adopting or using your product and services most successfully, and it helps inform, again, your business decisions. Any questions? So if you haven't considered a CRM, again, I'd encourage you just to take a look and get familiar with what it can offer your business. The second thing I would recommend is to, and this is all in the context of understanding your customer, and it would be around documenting your customer's experience. As a small business, again, you're running hard, you've got a lot of priorities, and one of the things that we can lose sight of, or I can say personally, I've observed, is where we forget what the customer's experience is as they interact with us, right? Your customer has a lot of touch points. That could be things like ordering a product or a service, coming into your store to look for something on a shelf. It could be contacting support to get help with a need or an issue. It could be getting an invoice from you for a payable to your business. Those are the kinds of contact points and interactions that your customers have. And what I would suggest you consider is taking one of the most important interactions you have and pretending you're a customer and going through the experience that they go through as they interact with you. And one good example would be, well, this customer wants to reach me, they have a question. So how does the customer do that? They might actually go into Google and type in your company name. They might land on your website. They might look in the footer and find your contact us information. And when they pull that page up, they might see chat or a ticketing system where you can put a request in. And so as you go through that experience as a customer, you capture that. And you can, have some notes about what's expected. One of the things that we did, this was last year, we went through this exercise with a particular audience of ours attempting to reach our call center. And what we found as we called the phone numbers and went through the phone tree and clicked on the buttons was that we actually had been sending the customer through a double loop, right? And had we not done that, we might not have caught that. Customer might tell you, hey, you've sent me through a couple of rounds through the loop and I'm getting stuck at the end. But if they don't tell you, you don't necessarily know that there's a pain. And so identifying and capturing that does two things. Number one, it allows you to identify any gaps or any areas of improvement that you want to make in this interaction with your business. So you can go in and refine and improve that touch point. Maybe an invoice, you want to provide some additional details about it that helps your customer not have to reach out to you to ask a question. The other benefit that this provides is let's say you get to a place where you say, I need to bring in a customer service team member to my company. And they say, well, how do people reach us? You already have a training tool right here because you've already documented what the customer's process is. And you say, this is their experience. This is how this works. So it really has a number of benefits. And I've done this and deployed this with a number of teams. And it's been very, very beneficial. The third piece I would say is capturing customer feedback. And again, this is in the theme of understanding your customer. Probably today, if you have a product or service, you're actively talking to your customer. Hey, what will work well for you? Where are you having challenges? Again, if you're providing some type of app or software, I'm sure you're having active interactions with your customers to listen and learn. One thing you might consider, though, is to start to formalize some type of customer feedback process. And the best practice here is to get the feedback, and I can talk about a few ways that can be done, but analyzing it and acting on it and following up on it is really the essential piece, right? If you ask for feedback, what you want to be able to do is listen to it, interpret it, organize it into themes. What are we hearing? Let's put it into themes. Let's decide what are we going to do to act upon what we've heard, and then closing the loop is following back up with your customers to tell them what you have done. So in my business, for example, we send out surveys to our customers' customers. We provide service to our customers' customers. And every month we get together on a call, the CEO, myself, and then the leadership team of this group, and we review every single bit of feedback. And then we organize that feedback into themes. What are we hearing? Where's the main pain points? And then we assign actions. And we say, what are we going to do about this? And how are we going to solve these pieces? And then we establish goals, and then we act on them, and then we circle back and close the loop. We might come back to clients and say, hey, we listened, and this is what we heard, and these are the changes that we've implemented. This is really, really powerful, this piece. So ways that you can capture customer feedback, you can do a survey. That can be a Google form, that can be using a piece of software to send a survey out, or you can do phone interviews. That's often where the real gold is, when you're asking the customer an open-ended question about, what do they like? What would they like to see? How can we improve? And they're giving you specifics, and you're having a conversation. And then you take that conversation, distill it down, and again, determine what elements you want to act on. So there can be a lot of forms of getting feedback. Another one, as a company grows larger, you actually go to your internal employees who are servicing your customers, and you say, what are you hearing? And you take their feedback and again, incorporate their feedback. So my encouragement here would be to, if you do not have some type of feedback process, start to build one. Pick one process and build it out. Next question.
So we're a 3-person team right now. Launched our service just over a month ago. 2 technical co-founders, and then I'm on the client side a lot of the time. Should every single person be on the client side, even the technical people?
Really good question. So when you say be on the client side, tell me what your thoughts are there.
On the phone interviews, reaching out to them as well, understanding the customer's pains, problems, what they love, what they don't love, because a lot of it does come back to product features,
right?
And sometimes it can get lost in translation coming from me, I think. So
That's a really, really good question. Personally, I think if there's capacity for the team members to hear directly from the customer, they're hearing directly from the customer and they're listening to their pain. I think, some of the dynamics of where those folks spend their time can potentially influence that, but being able to listen and hear is great. I mean, larger companies, it might be your product team is facilitating that feedback session, interviewing customers, distilling down those business requirements in business terms, and then the developers are then going to, code and, run their sprints or whatever they're doing to get that particular feature deployed. But certainly if there's capacity for it, or even selectively listening to what customers say directly, boy, that really helps to inform what you're working on. One of the pieces you have to decide is, typically it's about prioritizing, right? What's going to provide the most, the greatest ROI if we build this feature? Who needs this feature the most? Are 10 customers asking for it, or one customer asking for it? And is one customer asking for it our largest customer? If we don't do this, there's a risk they leave. I mean, there's those prioritization decisions that have to get made. But boy, listening to customers, we all get our eyes open when we do that. And that's fundamentally, we don't have a product and service to deliver if we don't have customers and we're not meeting their needs. Does that help?
Perfect.
Awesome. All right, any questions, thoughts on customer feedback? The last piece I would say is considering establishing some goals and metrics. So one small story, again, is when I joined the company, we had a support team. They had a ticketing system. They handled customer questions and needs, and this was manned by a small team of people that had been with the company from the very beginning. So they knew the answers, and they could provide really, really good service. But what we didn't have was metrics. So how many requests were coming in? If you had multiple audiences, who specifically needed help? Why did they need help? What was that need about? Was it the password reset problem? Was it the product was, had some fault with it? Why are they reaching out? I would argue that, and one of the statements from someone I worked for a couple of years ago that's always stuck with me is the best customer service is no service at all. And that's a really powerful statement when you think about, gosh, if I didn't have to have a customer service team, that means I've done a fabulous job anticipating customers' needs. And I've provided that information in the form of self-servicing tools, maybe the most intuitive piece of software so they don't need to call in and say, hey, I'm confused on how to use this or that. So what you can do is be thinking about building some simple metrics. Again, what's the volume look like so that you can plan for your staffing? Do I have enough people to handle the volume? What's the reason customers are calling? That's super, super important. And it also helps you say, what can we do about this? I'd like to reduce these calls. So let me take that feedback and let me go take some actions in our application, in our, on our website, in our knowledge base, whatever that may be, to help get those answers to the customer without requiring them to call in. They don't want to call in, right? I don't want to call American Airlines to have to change my flight or to get it. I want to just self-service it, right? We all want that. So building up some of those metrics can be really helpful because, again, it's helping you make smart decisions for the future, whether that's around staffing, whether that's around, again, providing information and addressing the pain points your customers have. So on the support side of things, the kinds of data that is typically tracked would be things like response times, right? How quickly am I handling that customer request or need? First contact resolution would be something like, I was able to help the customer the first time. They didn't have to come back and ask me over and over. We didn't have to have, let's say it was a chat. Well, let's say it was a ticket and an email was going back and forth. I was able to resolve that the very first time. CSAT scores, you heard customer satisfaction. You'll hear the term about CSAT. That's super important. Hey, what was your experience like as you reached out to get help? How would you rate us? And then knowledge-based articles can be another important activity that a support team does. Different organizations handle this differently, but the goal of allowing customers to self-service and get answers themselves is an important strategy around support. On the customer success side or account management side, it can be things like qualitative customer feedback. Again, what's the customer telling us? Customer health score, what that is, it's a subjective set of variables and elements that help your business understand whether the customer is healthy or at risk. So this exercise is coming up with, well, what would be the indicators of whether this customer is at risk of leaving the business or that they're healthy? And those are very specific to your business. You can, build a set of those elements and then derive a score, and then you can again assess which customers you want to be spending more time with and paying close attention to. The Net Promoter Score, NPS. You may have heard of Net Promoter Score. This is a common feedback tool for SaaS companies in particular. And Net Promoter Score is asking the question, and we've all probably been asked this question in a survey: how likely are you to recommend this business to your friends and family? And the answer is on a scale of 0 to 10. And over time, this allows us to benchmark what is our customer sentiment about our business. And it's organized into promoters, neutral, and detractors. And there's a scoring method that's used. It's not 1 to 100, but ultimately it's a negative 100 to a positive 100. And companies that are scoring, let's say north of 25, are doing a pretty good job. So the point here is that you want to build some type of feedback and feedback technique in place. Net Promoter Score is one, again, used with SaaS businesses, and then send those surveys out to your customers, get that feedback, take action, and track your progress over time. I always say improving your own customer service scores is the most important thing. It's important to understand maybe your competitors and how they're doing, but fundamentally, it's about improving where you were over time and making sure you're continuing to increase customer satisfaction. And then specifically to SaaS customers, things like churn and retention are super essential. Obviously, investors are looking at that data. If you're looking to get investment dollars, super important data point is retention. So those are some things to encapsulate small and maybe mid-size activities that you can look at to get a good foundation of understanding your customer. The second piece I would focus on is make sharing a priority. And again, as a business, you're running really, really fast. You have the answers. You're deciding what your product and service is going to do. It's likely in your head, and it's likely communicated through emails and conversations with customers and with your dev teams. But fundamentally, what you want to be thinking about right now, and I'll call it a habit, I'll call it a best practice, is getting that knowledge documented. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be in some fantastic system. It's really about getting the information that's in people's heads down. And I've seen this very, very consistently in the companies I've worked for, where the scenario can be, hey, I've got this question. Maybe it's not a common question. And the answer is, go talk to so-and-so. They'll know the answer, right? And that works, certainly, but it's time consuming. And that individual that you're going to ask the question to, they're probably an early employee of the business, or early, maybe they're one of the co-founders. But over time, taking their time to provide those answers is preventing them from doing their particular role. And it's just a slow process. It's just an inefficient process. The other piece is when you're a smaller company, you may have one individual doing one function. So you have one customer service person handling your customer service. You have one person handling, let's say, your onboarding, and so on. And so what you want to make sure is that you're requiring, what I would recommend is considering in your job descriptions, requiring documentation as part of the job. So that may be document a process, that may be establishing a procedure, maybe it's information about your products and services that just get put down so that, again, as future employees come into the organization, they have some material to work with. It's not me sitting across the room from you saying, okay, tell me about, what do customers ask for? One of the things that I would say at the simplest level is is building out an FAQ. So if you're the founder of the business and right now you're communicating with your customers, let's say again via email, and they've asked you a question and you've framed this beautiful response, when you send off that email to that customer, it's now lost. And it's only a one-to-one communication between you and that customer. If that information that you've communicated you can imagine that serving future customers, being delivered by future employees, grab that information, stick it in an FAQ. It might be an FAQ about your product, it might be an FAQ about your service, it might be an FAQ about a return policy, whatever that may be. Put it into a place that can be accessed by other team members. And again, it can serve your needs right now. If someone's on vacation, you've got to back up and provide an answer to a customer, and you've got that information handy. So it's really about it's really about consistency for your customer too. If you leave it to each employee to figure it out and go get the answers right, it's great to be resourceful. But what you ultimately want is you want consistency to be delivered to your customer. And that means having common information, shared information, that customer gets the same answer, whether they're talking to individual A, B, or C. And it also empowers employees. When you come into an organization, it's really nice to have tools and information that you can self-service to empower you to deliver a great experience to the customer. When you come in and they say, oh, I don't have anything really documented, just kind of sit next to me for a couple of weeks, that works okay. It's kind of what can happen. But if you have some material for them to help them build that knowledge and expertise, it's really empowering as an employee. So think of something that you can track and document now and just start practicing it. This is not hard to do, but it's really, really valuable as a habit to get into. One of the things that you can consider is something called a job aid. And a job aid is really a tool that is used, that aids the person providing the process or serving the customer. So it can be things like a step-by-step process. It can be a checklist. It can be a reference document. And a couple examples here that I've got. On the left, this is just a checklist in some business about operational readiness, right? So the employee needs to do A, B, C, D, and they've got a tool they can use to make sure that those things get done. On the right, this is actually a document that I wrote, and it's about best practices in leading effective client meetings. So as my customer success department has grown, when you come onto a company, there's just the fire hose, you're learning so much. And over time, you want to be able to go back and reference different material to help you do a job. And one of the jobs that teams have to do is they have meetings with customers, right? So what I wanted to do is establish expectations and some best practices on running a really good meeting, right? So that would be an example of a job aid. Any questions? All right. I mentioned knowledge base earlier. And if you have a website, you likely have some type of knowledge base tool, right? We're all using knowledge bases. We're going to, again, I use the example of American Airlines, and I'm typing in a question. What size does my backpack need to be when I'm traveling? I did that a couple months ago. And you get an answer, you get some type of reply. And so that type of a knowledge base, again, we're using them every day as consumers. And the power of it really is in the search. And what the search allows us to do is it allows us to see as a business, what are people looking for? So you're getting the analytics to say, what are people looking for? And when they're looking for those things, are they getting what they need? Are they getting an answer? Are they getting what they're looking for? So that analytics is really powerful. But one thing I would recommend considering is using a knowledge base and extending it for your internal teams, right? We think of knowledge bases and we think about them as being external facing, helping the customer self-service. But some knowledge bases at least have the ability to segment by audience. So audience A needs to have this type of content served up or available to them, and audience B. And some have the ability to have a segment that can serve your internal employees. So let's say you're a customer service person and you're answering a question. How nice would it be for that employee to be able to type in the question and get a response and be able to answer that question of the customers? So considering using a knowledge base to serve your own staff can be a valuable way to deliver great service to your customer. All right, so on this piece, again, think about that. And I would say I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about things I've learned in serving mid and large business customers. And these first items here are specifically about things I would recommend in terms of establishing best practices early. One of them is to make commitments and changes or get commitments put into writing. So oftentimes when you're a small business, you can just tell the customer, sure, we'll get that done. We'll have it done Friday, or here's the price you're going to pay for the service. And that works really, really well when you're small, because you know you're going to honor that and no one else is going to potentially need to be involved in meeting that commitment. But as you grow as a business, it can start to fall down. And what can start to happen is you've made a commitment to the customer, and now the customer is coming back to other individuals that are providing service to that customer, and it can become a he said, she said situation. And that's never a great position to be in for the customer or for your team members. So make it a practice now, or just consider putting things in writing, getting things documented, and even changes. Sometimes we, if you're in the software space, you may agree to do something for a customer that normally has a fee, or maybe a service that normally has a fee. I think it's a great practice to put a change order together, even if it's a $0 change order. You're telling your customer, I'm delivering value for you at no additional charge, versus just saying, all right, I'll go get that done for you. So that's a practice that I think is worth considering. The second thing is, we think about serving your future customer. Again, today you're handling this responsibility, but tomorrow you may have a team of people that are responsible to engage with that customer over time. And so right now I'd say think about things like standards, right? Put together, if you have a particular deck where you're covering things like an onboarding experience for a client, put that material down so that as you bring additional team members on, the customer on the other side is getting a consistent experience. Also establishing things like, I want to have an expectation that after every client meeting, we have notes and action items that go out, right? So what's important to you as a business, and what kind of experience do you want your customer to have on the other side? And again, for large business customers, these are some things that are I found to be valuable. And the last piece I would say is conducting periodic business reviews. And this is going to be for your larger business customers. And what this is, it's a powerful way to step back from the day-to-day problems, opportunities, needs that you may be dealing with your customer. Hey, I need that fixed. Hey, here's a fire I need to be put out. Hey, can you consider this in the future? You're really oftentimes talking about what the needs are right now and in the moment. What a business review does is it allows us to take a step back and ask the question, hey, how are we doing in our relationship? Are we aligned? Is there anything you would like to see from our business? How is your business? What are your future goals? And what we typically do in my company when we talk about business reviews is the first thing we're doing is we're celebrating successes. What happened last quarter or last year? What would we say are the successes that you as a client have seen in your business? And it's not just centered around our business, it's really about their success. What are some of the challenges that they faced? And what are some of the opportunities that we see? And after that, what we do is we may look back on some data and some metrics. How is your growth trajectory? How did you grow over last year? Other metrics that are obviously applicable to whatever your customers is using your product or service for. So you can track some metrics and then talk about the future state. And again, have a frank conversation about your relationship. How are we doing? Where are we now? How can we be a better partner to you? So it's really a partnership-centered conversation. This is one of the most powerful things and most valuable things that a customer success team can do. So that can be something to consider. A couple of things I'd say last, and then we'll open up for any Q&A, is some things I've learned the hard way. I worked with large business clients and mid-sized business clients for many, many years. And a couple of things I've learned the hard way. One is don't assume your customers understand the value of your product or service. And what can happen over time is perhaps a team of people you worked with a year ago, there's just inevitably going to be turnover. New people are going to come into the organization. And you might assume that behind the scenes at their conference table right here, you might assume that they are communicating your value, the value your product or service provides to these new team members the way you would. And that assumption can be faulty. And it's a great practice to repeat the value of your product and services when you have, again, maybe it's more formal engagements, maybe it's cases where there's new team members that are joining their organization. It's a great time to say, hey, I'd love to, I know this will be a review for so-and-so, but I'd love to just kind of recap and introduce you to what our product or service is and the value and the history we've had with your business so that those new team members of that organization can hear it directly from you. The second piece I would encourage, and this is kind of negotiation 101, is when a client asks you for something that's, let's say, outside of the norm, or ask for something in return. One good example is, hey, will you build that feature for free? You might say, absolutely, I'd love to do that. How about you in return? Would you be willing to provide a testimonial? Would you be willing to be a part of a case study? Would you be willing to be in a focus group for us, right? So you're creating a win-win situation. And that practice has served many businesses I've worked for very well. And the last piece I'd say is to consider always broadening your relationships beyond a champion. And what I mean by that is sometimes you're working with a customer and you get to know them really well. I've had customers over from at my house with their families and gone out and done activities with these clients. And you start to feel really comfortable because they're champions of your business. They're advocates of your business. They love you. They love your product and they love your service. And you can kind of potentially become complacent. And what can happen is when that employee leaves the business, you can be left with a big hole. Now your champion is no longer at that company. Maybe they got promoted. Maybe they went to a different business. And so making sure that you're spending time building relationships with other people at that company. It might be the sales organization. It might be operation team members. It might be other colleagues at that business. Getting to know them, inviting them into meetings so that you don't have all your eggs in one baskets. I'm going to stop there and open up for any questions. Thank you so much.
Right, we have one question in the chat. What is a good way to evaluate whether you are touching your customer too often and they provide software as a service?
That's a great question. How do I know if I'm touching them too often? So I'd say part of it's thinking about what's the conversation around. If your outreach is to get feedback about, again, your product or your piece of software, hey, I want to know, would you like this feature? Would you not like this feature? Some of that can be asking the customer, would you like to give us your feedback? That's one thing I would do is ask them, hey, and typically customers will say, heck yeah, I'd love to give you some feedback, right? Because your need may be put to the top of the list. In terms of cadence, if it's really around, hey, I'm checking in, I'm making sure the software is working well for you, I want to know how things are going. In part, it can be a function of how large that customer is. For some customers, you might have regular weekly conversations. In part, it just depends on what do they need. For other customers, it may be lower touch, and maybe you're talking to them once every month or once every couple months. So I don't know that I would say too much is too much, or there is any place where it's too much unless they tell you, hey guys, I've got my job to do, and then you kind of sort that out.
Nothing yet. Feel free to chime in with questions in the chat or the Q&A, but Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, so we deliver our service through a mobile app, business to consumer, college students.
Okay.
Like one of our fears or one of my fears for sure is like sending them too many messages and like notifying them too much. That kind of goes back to that last one, but like how do we not annoy them? Or how do we know if we are? So I don't want to annoy someone and then they turn off notifications and then everything is just closed to them.
Can you imagine asking the questions of these, send a note to those consumers, send a survey out and say, how often would you like, are we contacting you enough, or would you like to hear from us more? Mm-hmm. And getting feedback. This is a great example of asking for feedback and listening to what they say, instead of making assumptions of what we think that they might want or need. It's a great use case for some type of feedback gathering. Yeah.
I guess building on that, we've been reaching out for a lot of feedback, but have very limited responses. Mm-hmm. So what are like any tips you have for increasing that response rate?
And are you sending out some type of form? Yeah. So it's
through email.
Yeah, it's like more a form or like a conversation for a call. So.
Yeah, and they're not taking you up on the conversation for a call.
Like 2 out of 80 people responded to that.
Okay.
We thought about taking it to our ride support, which is, I don't know if it would be appropriate for ride support.
That's a chat, like
to be messaging them, but we'll have people talking to us quite a bit in ride support. So I thought about maybe instead of using the channel of emails, maybe trying that and seeing if that works well.
I love testing. We're really big on A/B testing. This isn't working well, let's go try this. If that doesn't work well, let's go try this. So a lot of it is testing and seeing what works. One thing you can consider is offering something in return. And people think of like, well, $15 Starbucks or whatever. I'm talking about, what could you offer in return? And it might be the chance to have their feedback on your software heard or prioritized, or, something that would be of value to your particular end user that you could offer in return for providing you some feedback. Again, it doesn't have to be monetary. It can be some other benefit that you think that they would appreciate, that would warrant them to take that action and give you what you're looking for. Yeah.
We had a couple more questions come through. Zach asked, as you mentioned earlier in your presentation, a company would want to plan and execute servicing your customers during growth mode. I took this as make sure you don't have to scramble and backfill a need after you require it. That makes sense, but do you have any input on that inflection point / ideal time to look to hire? It isn't fun for anyone to have someone unengaged twiddling their thumbs.
Right, so you don't want to hire too early and you don't want to hire too late. What's that sweet spot? Well, part of it's, having some data to see the trajectory of what's going to happen. We've got this many companies today, and if we look at our history, this is where we're going to be. I mean, part of it's going to be assessing what do I need to service the customer, right? I mean, depending on the customer size, you may say, when we reach this point, I know I can't handle it any longer. And that's the point where you've got to consider bringing in some additional resources. And oftentimes when you're a small business, people are doing multiple things, right? They might be answering customer service calls and they might be doing these 4 other responsibilities until you get to the place where they can specialize, or you're hiring, again, a very specific special role. So I think in part it depends on your business situation. One thing I would say that you can invest in, as we've talked about, is start now to get the training that you might want. And I'm not talking about just onboarding a new employee to your business. I'm talking about being able to do the job you want them to do. That's a really good investment of your time, because that will come when you bring that person in. For many of you that have known and who brought an employee in, it's time consuming. You've got to fill their time. They've got 40 hours available to you, and you want to be able to have some material and structure to help them get oriented while you're doing your job. So I'd say invest there for sure.
And then our next question, we have a situation where our customer contacts are not necessarily the user. What's a good way to discover the actual user? This is for software as a service.
So what would be the contact is not the user? I'd love to hear a little more about the difference. Is the contact the business and the user is their customer, perhaps, or?
That's what it sounds like. He hasn't chimed in yet. But there is another question. We have customers who are signed up as probably longer term customers. We have other customers who we know up front will be short terms, which is 1 to 3 months. What can we do to account for these when measuring churn?
That's a great question. What can we do to account for them to measure churn? I would say, I mean, it's a category, right? You have a customer on for a short window of time and that's your expectation. That would be a great question for one of the consultants here in terms of what I'm not sure I have a great solution for that other than being able to identify that the lifespan for this customer is X. And there's good reason for why it's X. It's it can be an expensive proposition to have a customer on your software for a very limited time, right? You're really ultimately looking for long-term recurring revenue from those customers, but it sounds like there's a, important use case where it makes sense to have a short lifespan as a client. Thanks.
And then the previous question did specify it's upper level managers are the contacts and lower level employees are the hands-on users. We don't know who they are, and they are the source of feedback, et cetera, for software.
Yeah, and that's a really common situation. I would say if you can, try to talk to those users. So, I mean, I can relate to our business. The decision makers, you need to make sure they understand the value of your product and service. And the conversation with them can be very different from your frontline users. So, when we do things like survey feedback, we will typically include, we're including decision makers when we ask for feedback, but sometimes those decision makers are not in the detail. They're not using the software. They don't understand the software, right? You need to survey them, but surveying the users and talking to the users is super, super valuable because those users tend to be, I would just describe them typically as influencers, right? They're the ones going, this piece of software, it's taking me more time than the way I used to do it. And they're complaining and those managers are hearing it and it's affecting the perception. So being able to get in front of them and listen to their pain points, if that can be arranged, for sure is really, really valuable.
Don't you know that you have to bring on a relationships manager? Like, what are the telltale signs that the founding team shouldn't be doing it, they can't do it successfully?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe you've got 50 customers, or there's some number, and it depends on what the interactions and the touches are. But maybe you've got 50 customers kind of comes to mind as a potential starting point to say, hey, I know that the staff I have in-house can no longer effectively manage those relationships because you've got to be building the new product or refining the product or operating the business, right? There's a lot of competing priorities there. And so when that time comes, and again, those numbers can vary some, but maybe it's when you've got 50 accounts and you're saying, okay, I know now that these customers need some more attention. And when we talk about customer success, it's really the number of accounts an individual can handle is a function and part of the size of the business. So a customer success manager, maybe, let's say a senior customer success manager with a lot of experience may handle, and if you have large business customers, they could handle 8 accounts, they could handle 12 accounts. And it's real high touch. You're talking to the customer weekly, you have a lot of interaction and engagement with that client. Whereas, let's say it's small business customers. Well, maybe a customer success manager could handle between, let's say, 150 and 250 or 100 to 250 accounts. And that's a little more of a tech touch, right? You're using technology to, run, campaigns and communicate out features and benefits. And then when a customer says, yeah, I'm really interested in that particular team member may get involved in maybe a cross-sell or an upsell. And so, but a lot of that's being pushed and managed by technology and not individual touch. So again, the size of the company will dictate how many accounts that an individual can effectively manage. And in an organization, you may have, again, some handling a really large number. It could be hundreds. I mean, it could be 400 or 500 accounts, low touch, using technology, and then others where it's real high touch and it's very relationship centric, and they're coming into your offices or you're visiting their offices or you're meeting at trade shows. and you're bringing in others in your organization to be introduced to the customer. So depending on your customer size, that can affect how many folks you need to manage these clients. Yeah.